Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. We're the place where we sift through stacks of sources, pull out the key insights, and basically give you a shortcut to getting up to speed. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a pretty powerful piece of writing. It makes some very specific, very critical claims about a major political figure. Our job here is to walk you through the source material. We'll lay out its arguments, the examples it uses, so you can quickly get the gist of it. And like always, we're presenting the content impartially, just helping you understand what the source says without us taking any kind of viewpoint. We're just exploring the info, not picking sides. Okay, so this deep dive, it focuses on a source discussing what it calls Peter Obi's disparate actions and tribalistic character. It's quite a title. The author actually starts off by commending President Tinubu for clearing his schedule, going down for an on-the-spot assessment of the carnage in Yawata, Benue State, calls it leadership that some past presidents did not show. But then, right away, it contrasts this. It says Peter Obi is now criticizing President Tinubu over the Benue killings. What do you make of that opening, starting there?
Yeah, that's quite a strategic opening, isn't it? It immediately sets up this contrast. A perceived positive action from Tinubu and then criticism from Obi right next to it definitely sets a specific tone before you even get to the main accusations. It's a way to sort of frame how you're supposed to see what comes next.
That's a really good point. Okay, so from that setup, the source then pivots. It asks us to cast our minds back to Sunday, May 22, 2022, to a very specific and very tragic event. It goes into detail about the killing of Haria. She was pregnant. Her husband was Jubril Ahmed, and their 4 young daughters, Fatima, 9, Khadija, 7, Hadiza, 5, and Zaytuna, 2. The source says they were killed in broad daylight at a Rumba South local government area of Anambra State.
Right, and this is a very, very specific incident. Horrific, really. And the source puts it right at the heart of its argument. It says the killings were by unknown gunmen believed to be members of IPOB. That's the indigenous people of Biafra. And then, crucially, the source immediately adds the same IPOB that Peter Obi defended. That connection is clearly central to the narrative they're building.
It's absolutely central, yeah. And from there, the source really pushes its point. It claims that even though this terrible thing happened in Obi's home state, Alhambra, and apparently close to his village, Agulu, Peter Obi did not condemn the killings until I called him out. The source says he finally addressed it, but a whole week after the incident. And then it adds that Mr. Obi never visited the scene of the incident nor Harira's family in Kokoli. And also, neither did he donate money to them, unlike, the source implies, things he does now because he wants to contest the 2027 presidential elections. That's a pretty direct hit on motive.
It is. It's not just alleging inaction or slow action. It's assigning a very specific political motive to it. And this leads right into the core accusation about this particular event. The source asks, rhetorically, and why? Anyway, it then answers its own question. Because Harir and her children are not Igbo. In the eyes of Obi, they are mere Abalis and Malams from Adamawa, whose lives do not matter to Obi as much as those from his immediate constituency. That's an incredibly direct and, frankly, harsh claim about his character, using those terms Abalis and Malams, which are derogatory terms, to suggest a really deep bias.
Yeah, very strong language, and the source doesn't leave it there. It asks, or how else can you justify the difference in Peter Obi's actions? Then it starts providing these contrasting examples, times when, according to the author, the victims were Igbo. It mentions an Igbo actor who died at the Annam River in Anambra State. And in that case, the source says Obi paid a condolence visit to his family and donated money.
Exactly. This is where the source really tries to build its case for a pattern of behavior. It's setting up a direct comparison, and it adds more examples. It claims Obi did the same for several high and low persons of Igbo descent who were killed in the southeast.
Sure.
It specifically names the family of Chike Akunyili's husband, who was murdered in Anambra State in September 2021. So the source is clearly trying to highlight what it sees as a major difference in how Obi responded.
And it hammers the point home, asking directly, why did he not do the same for the family of Harira Jubril, who was killed in the same Anambra, along with her underage daughters? End quote. Then the author ties it all together, states that this is in line with Obi's tribalistic character, which is his regular trademark. End quote. Asserting flat out that Peter Obi treats people of Igbo descent differently from how he treats other Nigerians.
And that right there is the absolute core thesis of this piece. It's using these specific tragic incidents as evidence, as pillars for this overarching argument about a perceived tribalistic pattern. It's suggesting a fundamental bias. That, according to the source, How Obi reacts depends on the ethnic identity of the victims involved. That kind of claim, especially in a place as diverse as Nigeria, is obviously a serious challenge to someone's suitability for national leadership. It questions their impartiality.
Right. And to really drive this home, the source brings up one more comparison. It says Obi danced naked in public, which is an idiom, right? Meaning he strongly and publicly condemned it when Deborah Samuel Yakubu was killed in Sokoto back on May 12, 2022. But the source claims, till today, he has said nothing after Chinedu and Omama, two brothers, were burnt to death by a mob in Onitsha, Anambra State, on Wednesday, November 1st, 2023.
Mm-hmm. This final comparison is meant to sort of seal the deal for the source's argument. It presents yet another instance where, at least in the author's view, Obi's reaction or lack thereof was different, based on who's involved. It's one last attempt to really reinforce that idea of a selective response, to cap off the argument about these alleged tribalistic tendencies.
So, with all these specific allegations, these comparisons, and this very strong language, what's the final takeaway message the author wants you to have?
Well, the source doesn't mince words. It concludes very directly. Such a person should never be the president of Nigeria. And then, interestingly, it anticipates the pushback. It says, now watch as his ethnically driven, obedient horde will amass here to insult, abuse, and threaten me. But not even one of them, the author claims, can challenge the facts I have presented here. So that ending really does two things. It states its conclusion unequivocally, and it tries to preemptively defend itself by asserting the factuality of its claims while characterizing the likely opposition. It really highlights how polarized these discussions can get.
So we've just walked through a source that really goes directly after Peter Obi's character and his actions. It uses these very specific, tragic examples like the killing of Harir Jubril and her daughters, and contrasts his alleged responses to different situations. The central argument that Obi supposedly shows a tribalistic character by treating Igbo people differently from other Nigerians is built on these detailed cases. What's really notable is how the source weaves together these different events, these specific dates, trying to build what it presents as a clear pattern of behavior, and using some pretty strong rhetorical tactics too.
Absolutely. And this really brings up a broader question for you, the listener, to think about. What does it mean when public figures face accusations like this of selective responses based on identity? What are the implications? How might accusations like these affect public trust or even national unity, especially in a really diverse society? Understanding claims like the ones in this source and how they're constructed is pretty crucial, I think, for evaluating leadership and just navigating the really complex stories that shape our political landscape.